Good morning. You're attending the Telco webinar series sponsored by Vitria Technology. And today's panelists are Charlotte Patrick, industry analyst and thought leader, and Andrew Colby, 30-year telecom industry executive heading engineering teams and solution groups. This webinar examines the financial need for telcos to implement AIOps backed by newly released research. And following this drill down into the broader picture of assurance needs, Andrew will take us through proof points and case studies in production. Turning it over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Deborah, and welcome to everybody listening today. It's great to be speaking with you. So as an industry analyst, I am interested in what telco should do with AI, automation and analytics, which I often shorten to A3. And then how much cash can they actually make? So my portion of the webinar is going to be about the value of kind of specifically assurance and AIOps in the telco. But I thought I'd start by putting the value into the context of a telco as a whole to illustrate what an important part assurance plays in this picture. So this diagram is one of my ongoing research items and shows a summary of my calculations of the value of A3 for an average telco. To give you some idea of the methodology I use, I have an ongoing spreadsheet exercise which breaks down a typical telco into 250 of its largest processes and considers where A3 is likely to bring benefits in future. The exercise then calculates what this means in terms of financial value, both revenue uplift and CapEx, OpEx decrease. So describing the structure of the diagram, the columns I hope are self-explanatory. And then as I went through each of these 250 processes, I began to notice similar types of problem needing to be solved, popping up in different places across the telco. And these problems then kind of to have the same types of solution that they need from A3. So my diagram is divided into 6 rows, each with similar problem solution combinations. First row includes processes which are classic big data problems. Analytics and machine learning are needed to understand large, mostly structured data sets, looking for patterns, diagnose problems, and predict and prescribe resolutions. Then the next row is a grouping of those processes mostly in need of automation. These tend to be related to large teams doing somewhat repetitive tasks. Row 3 includes use cases which need to understand customers in order to serve them better, and I've grouped them under kind of personalization. We have classic planning problems in row 4, which require solutions around forecasting and optimization. And then row 5 and 6 include use cases which might need AI. So row 5 is where humans and machines interact, and analytics and AI such as natural language processing are helpful. And row 6 includes a range of what one might term point solutions, kind of specifically requiring new types of AI, so drones or in-store robots, all of those places that kind of didn't have a place anywhere else on the diagram. So just to be clear on the different box colors shown, this is the average yearly financial value calculated for adding A3 into the process. Those in pink are over $50 million a year, and describing them from the top left of the diagram. So we've got kind of network management, addition of intelligence and automation into the network, which reduces staff costs and optimizes expensive equipment, expensive spectrum, as you would imagine, a large figure. Then assurance, the push towards a self-healing network, again, reducing CapEx and OpEx. We've got network planning towards the bottom. Here, the addition of machine learning into planning tools positively impacts network CapEx and OpEx decisions. And then also on that column, field services. This area has kind of large teams where automation and intelligence bring opportunities to optimize headcount and kind of the amount of hours needed for traveling and completed work activities. So when you add those all together, there's quite a big value attached. And then looking at some of the other areas in blue, which are between 10 million and 50 million in yearly value, in the channels column, so that's moving along to the right, there are opportunities across the channels to better understand customers and employees as they're speaking with the customers and what problems they have using analytics and machine learning. The dollar value is considerably less than on the network side, because although many of the projects create new efficiencies in large teams, the financial value is just not as big as creating efficiencies in the network. And then moving one over in the marketing column. So machine learning to manage data, create segmentation, prescribe next actions will drive improved revenue mix and assist with campaign management. And of course, as soon as you talk about increasing revenues, you start to see good financial value. Although it depends where the telco is, because a good amount has probably already been taken with the focus on improving churn management in the last 10 years and campaigns such as prepay recharge, which have also had good dollar value. However, there's still value, I think, to be taken from more micro-segmentation and possibly some Gen AI helping to create personalized content. So I'm continuing to keep those in the blue category. So summarizing this slide, my calculations are based on a telco with revenues of 16 billion. And looking across the diagram, I estimate a 1.2 billion uplift to the bottom line per year from all known A3 projects in the next 5 to 10 years. So I hope that's kind of clear about my thinking as to what you're seeing. This mostly comes from the top left-hand boxes on the diagram because of the large expected savings on the network from automation and use of more intelligence. A3 also offers significant benefit in use cases where kind of large groups of people are involved in repetitive activities. So for example, the contact center, where kind of small automations or perhaps some Gen AI in future can improve the productivity of a large headcount doing roughly the same sorts of activities each day. However, the savings made are reducing the headcount by, say, we're going to reduce the headcount of 40 at $120,000 of fully loaded cost. That's only kind of $4 million in total. So it's a good amount, but it's not in the tens of millions or the hundreds of millions of savings, which are possible from deploying A3 on the network and say making savings on power consumption or reducing capacity requirements. So one last thought on this slide, when looking for good use cases, how do you find a good use case? So one general trend seen when building this diagram is that certain types of use case offer good problems for A3 to resolve and others do not. So for example, a use case which has a large data set that either changes rapidly or requires insight to be retrieved from them quite quickly, requiring machine learning in place of rules-based analytics. So that's something that machine learning does well, and other sorts of analytics would either provide an inferior solution or no solution at all. So that's kind of, where there's a good problem to be solved by A3. However, the fact that the use case offers a strong reason for using A3 does not mean it necessarily generates a strong return, or at least in the short term. So as demonstrated by the bottom row of the diagram, which includes a range of new and intelligent solutions using A3, but which offer very specific solutions with, I believe, very limited ROI at the moment. So you're needing all the time to think about, well, is this something that A3 can solve? If yes, is it also something that's going to provide a decent payback as well? And that can change where you go looking for things on the diagram. So to ensure that business cases are realistic and include a thorough understanding of the doability of the project, including, do we have the data? Is the vendor solution mature? And are the users trained and ready to make best use of the investment once finished? So, your business cases are quite complex in this area. So, moving into some more detail about how I calculate the value of A3, particularly for the benefit of today's webinar around assurance and AIOps. And a fun fact, this area is actually one of the biggest users of A3 across the telco. My first consideration is to look at where A3 fits within the assurance AIOps portfolio. This diagram shows that the types of A3 needed in the rows, so moving from at the top from more simple analytics in the top row towards more prescriptive and predictive closed loop activities at the bottom row. And in order just to kind of articulate the opportunities a little better, I've divided the columns between use cases for the NOC, as you can see in the first column, and then the SOC, out into use cases of assurance data into places like channel and marketing, and then over to the far right, where I think it could be provided to customers and partners in future. So what you're seeing then is a series of boxes which shows a variety of different types of use for the data coming from assurance. In the blue boxes, this is showing activities which are increasingly important, particularly with the new complexities of 5G. Highlighting a few here, we've got issue prediction, automated root cause analysis, and adapted thresholds for KPIs. These are not new things, but they're more important due to hybrid networks, multiple new services needing to see across domains, and that sort of thing. Then we've got assurance of the VNFs, including performance monitoring and fault management up and down the stack, another area of increasing need. New requirements for RAN insurance include the monitoring of service quality issues for, say, massive MIMO, and capabilities to help assurance in instances of, say, we've got a shared ownership between the telcos, and everybody needs to have a view of the assurance and assurance on the RAN. And then the last column, so for enterprise ecosystem partners, including a list of existing and newer requirements from third parties. So very new here. I see some activity, but mostly quite straightforward. However, I think it's interesting, especially with projects like NEF and Kamara, where assurance will be provided via APIs out to different parties going forward. Obviously, there are loads of boxes here that I could choose from when I'm trying to select some calculation of value for assurance in general. And I actually track 12 boxes currently, where I think there's a good potential uplift for increasing use of A3. So let me just show you these calculations quickly. If I could ask for a change of slide, please. So, to clarify, these are my calculations of financial upside from adding A3 into assurance and AIOps for this typical $15 billion telco. Each of the boxes on the previous slide was considered for their ability to influence the bottom line when A3 was added in, and these are the 11 that I'm currently tracking. You have one box at the top which is in grey, so this is showing a value generated by assurance from improving the customer experience. Now, so theoretically, each of my use cases should have some value for customer experience and generating increase in revenues and so forth, but it's really difficult to split them across the use cases, so I keep one top level box. I then have some in pink text, and these denote where a use case is one of kind of the big picture, transformational, final view of what an autonomous network might look like and the sort of goals that are involved there. And I like to keep sight of these when doing calculations because they're quite difficult to know how to calculate value for, and but they are also super important. You know, what will self-healing bring to the network in future? So I keep them in pink so that I can remember them. When calculating value, what are good questions to be asked in the assurance domain? So, well, hey, first of all, does the use case provide increased efficiencies in the knock and sock? Does it reduce truck rolls in field services? Does it reduce the amount of spend on network equipment? And will it save money in the contact center by reducing the number of calls? So you need to kind of think quite laterally when looking at value. As you can see, so I'm looking quite broadly about where revenue uplift or CapEx, OpEx decreases might come from. And once the decision has been made, I then get the slightly tricky task of actually ascribing financial value. Basically, I have a set of assumptions about network costings and the cost of teams within this typical telco that I use in order to kind of create some consistency of calculations across the whole telco, because it is super easy to do something like, say, look at what the vendors are saying about all of the benefits that could come from my 11 use cases. And if I included all the churn reductions from all of them, I might end up with no customers ever leaving at all. It's quite easy to get a bit over ambitious. So I try to create some consistency, and I then apportion costs to the different use cases as it looks sensible. When I've done this, I then check back from the data points which I get from the telcos and from the vendors about what they have experienced, and I go, so okay, if I use these sorts of apportionments, does this mean that I'm also getting close to what people are seeing on the ground? So I hope that this was some interesting background thinking about the value of assurance and AIOps in the coming years. And I kind of wanted to end my time today with a few thoughts more generally on where telcos should be focusing to ensure that they get access to this financial value. So firstly, it kind of feels like we're at a time in telecoms where revenue growth is eluding them and cost savings is such a big focus. So obviously assurance is a big part of that. And I think the key question is, how can the industry provide good customer experience on a budget, spending the minimum possible on the key influences of customer experience, such as network capacity, and where does assurance best support this objective? So that's number one. The central tenet of creating this business value is obviously efficiency. How can we optimize the use of large capital and operational costs such as spectrum and capacity and cloud? And how can we best use the scarce skill sets in network operations and out in the field? Considering the part that A3 can play, we have seen the fairly slow delivery of new capabilities such as machine learning to address areas of efficiency in new ways, mostly because there's a lot of other requirements underneath their deployment, and it's complex for telcos doing this. However, removing repetitive, boring tasks from the NOC and moving down the road to self-healing offers, some really good opportunities for efficiency. And indeed, as pointed out by all parties involved in discussions around 5G, it's not going to be possible to manage the service delivery lifecycle or support services with demands for things like low latency without intelligent operation, without more automation, more intelligence. And ensuring that customers are getting what they paid for, another important thing, and understanding where issues are arising that need to a fix to be put in place. So there are just a list of assurance type capabilities that are going to be needed. So in conclusion, what I thought might be interesting to say, I would actually like to hand over now to Andrew to bring my numbers alive with some discussions on how to save costs while also underpinning new revenue streams. I know that he has a number of interesting use cases to share with you. So Andrew, if I may hand over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. And I really appreciate it. This is a super exciting time for AIOps and automation and A3, and I'm excited to be part of it with Vitria. We've been thinking about AIOps and operating in this space for several years, and really about how to realize a lot of those big savings. I mean, via AIOps, touches on 3 of your top 5 value drivers for telecom operators. And as we've thought through and built out this capability, this application, we've identified the 9 areas here that are the technologies and areas where we deliver value and have the potential to deliver value. Now, an exciting thing about AIOps in general is that it can be introduced incrementally into an existing telecom environment to provide value along any of these 9 areas, from the initial collection and ingestion of a wide variety of data, different faults and measures, network telemetry, even messy data like care operations and customer experience measures are able to be ingested and incorporated and then refined into valuable, useful, actionable data. This requires, in addition to a flexible collection and ingestion, it requires an enrichment step, and then turning all of this raw data into useful information is, we use a signal analysis for that. So we turn these time series into signals to detect information and then group them and correlate them so that we can identify what's related. And maybe what's related in obvious ways like network topology, and maybe what's related in less obvious ways that are a logical topology, a service topology, a time, or even a business impact. Now, all of these then are able to be evaluated for severity, impact on the business, even classified according to technical and business rules. And ultimately, the goal is to build these into actionable insights that can be taken either by engineers, by people, or ultimately full-on automation, as you've been talking about, to push this back into the network through orchestration or business process automation to execute the fixes, the adjustments, and the true self-healing network. Now, that's not even the end, because once the actions are taken, either manually or an automated way, you need to go back and assure that the issue has been addressed, that it's actually fixed the problem. So this entire pipeline is underlying the VIA AIOps platform, and is what delivers the value and allows and enables value to be delivered at multiple points along that pipeline. Now, not only can this be introduced incrementally into existing environments, but it really is a platform for the expansion of automation. We refer to this as incremental transformation, where as a service provider, it gives you the flexibility to select where you want to impact your business, pick the business metrics and the operations that you want to change, and then design change around that and implement it in an incremental way. Via AIOps, we've also implemented as an integrated part of an entire automation environment where it consumes, for example, provisioning data to identify the as-designed network inventory, and it learns the as-built topology, peering relationships within the network, application infrastructure and network relationships up and down the infrastructure stack, and leveraging customer experience or service experience measures as label data to provide that automation in determining incident priority and impact. Historically, it's required expert engineers to set values for what's good and what's bad in whatever measure it is that's important. If it's a network measure like throughput, packet latency, jitter, and others, or if it's a service measure on the service throughput, numbers of streams, downshifts, whatever it is, with the customer experience and service experience label data, we're able to use unsupervised machine learning to set those values and really scale up the capabilities in terms of measures and insights that are provided by the system. Now, there's also the dimension of taking that all the way through to initiating the resolution actions, and there's the ability to build trust in the system. So we have a methodology to allow the automation to be defined but verified. So it's kind of a crawl, walk, run methodology to define and implement all of this automation and have points where it can be verified by an engineer, by a human, to look and say, yes, this is the right answer, this is the right step, and proceed and take it. As trust is built, then that can be fully automated, allowing the service provider to go faster. We have another capability that's really different from all of these, which we refer to as dynamic populations. Now, historically, as a service provider, you'd look at your subscribers, your users, in natural ways that they would be partitioned across the network. It might be by geography, it might be by service, it might even be by device, by UE or CPE. But as there's more and more different services being consumed, and the need and expectation for real-time insight into all of those services, that way of looking at your subscribers and your services, it just doesn't really scale and provide the insights you need. So with dynamic populations, we actually build views across the network every day. In some of our customer, literally hundreds and thousands of these views of subscribers that are impacted by different events in the network. Now, event in the network might be that their device, their mobile phone, is taking a software update, or their set-top box has had new software pushed to it, or a piece of infrastructure, an RU or a fiber node that serves them has been updated. Whatever the changes that's impacted them, they're dynamically assigned as a population and they're tracked automatically. And because of the automation and machine learning, we're able to identify when that population behavior changes. Because we know their history before the population existed, we know what those subscribers did, and we can see what they're doing after the change takes place. And we can identify when these changes have impacts on the subscriber's behavior or on the service delivery very quickly, within hours of the change taking effect. And this has been used very effectively in some of our customers to identify when changes are working or when changes are not working. Now, when changes are not working, as an example, a set-top box software update, it might take hours to see that, and this measure is very sensitive. Can be seen in usually while the overnight team that's done the change is still on shift. The flip side of that is you can actually tell when changes are working, and that's been effective as well because it allows you to go faster. I'll go into some case studies to give you some examples of some of the deployments and what some of our customers have done with via AIOps and the impact it's had on their business. This first one is just on the left side of that pipeline, data collection and incident generation. In this case, it's a network operations center that receives hundreds of link down events every day. Many of those are simply loss of redundancy, but some are actually service impacting. And the network operations center, the level 1 NOC engineer has to actually investigate it to determine what the impact is. That may be as simple as connecting to the device and collecting interface stats for the link. And because these are continuous counters, they have to be collected over an interval, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to see what the impact is. So by introducing automation to go and periodically collect that data for every interface that's in this condition, it avoids all of those steps. As soon as that was done, it was obvious the value provided when the NOC engineer could avoid the wait time and just go in the second time, look at the results, and quickly the service provider was able to actually enable the system to automatically close incidents where the interface is restored but hasn't accurately reported. And it took 60% out of their handle time for these issues and saved multiple headcount in the NOC, freeing those people up to do much higher value work. Next slide, please. Change management is a very valuable use case, the impact on change management that leverages the dynamic populations that I was talking about, and to be able to quantify and understand the impact of change throughout the network. Change happens continuously, basically every day, every night. And in large organizations, it's often the case that the operations teams are not aware of all of the changes going on, and not because they don't want to be, but it's simply an impossibility. There's changes in the network infrastructure. There's changes in the end devices that are pushed out from centralized teams, and often, sometimes even from third parties, from the device providers themselves. The result on the subscriber is, though, that they end up experiencing service degradation or service interruption. So what do? They call their service provider, and the care operator, whoever they're dealing with on the phone or online, obviously nobody wants a subscriber to have a bad experience. So they go through the troubleshooting steps. They can't determine what the issue is. So they say, all right, we'll take the next step. We'll either, for a fixed line or a fixed service, we'll send a technician out to look at it, or we recommend you come into the store, or you change your handset, or you reset your device, which subscribers really hate. So by being able to track these changes and the impact on subscribers' experience on a change by change basis, we can detect these change management events that have a negative impact on the subscriber experience, and identify where it's a network issue that's causing that impact. It's not an issue at the subscriber's premises. In the case of our customer, who is a fixed line provider, they avoid hundreds of thousands of customer premise visits by preventing them from being scheduled or canceling them once they are scheduled, and making the fix and change in the network itself to address the underlying issue and problem. And this is literally one of those millions of dollars a year problems that is in the top 5 of Charlotte's groups. Next slide, please. The last case study I'll share with you here is a customer that had a network operations center that was monitoring video service delivery. They were dealing with over 450 incidents a month that each one had to be manually investigated. And it was taking a lot of time to understand, is the problem local or nationwide? Is the problem in our infrastructure as a service provider, or is it the content provider? With the AIOps software, we were able to learn baselines, normal operation, and the dependencies in the devices in the network, and automate the detection. So this immediately was able to reduce false positive. And the result ultimately was to eliminate the eyes on glass monitoring that the NOC was doing, and replace that with the automated detection and assignments, so that actions could be taken by the fix agent, whether it's the NOC or other organizations within the company. So this ultimately reduced the total number of incidents they had to deal with to fewer than 5 per day. It improved overall availability of the service by reducing the time to understand, detect, and understand, and effectively eliminated the need for that eyes on glass NOC, reducing overall staffing for it by over 50%. So this was a win-win-win all the way around, where automation improved the subscriber experience, the service delivery, and provided significant cost savings, and really eliminated some low-level work and freed up those engineers to provide much higher level value and services within the company. I'm going to look over and see in the Q&A if I have any questions visible. I think, Charlotte, you're muted. Jamie, can we unmute Charlotte? All right, I'm going to skip the first one because that's for Charlotte. I'll take the second one, which is for me. It says, does VIA AIOps consolidate and build a single pane of glass for our monitoring across different platforms and services? It's not really a single pane of glass. We see AIOps and VIA AIOps in particular as the first pane of glass, which is to bring together all of the information across a wide variety of sources. Might be fault, might be performance, might be care operations, and have that single place that it comes together. It's not the single pane of glass because it's not going to have the level of detailed information that an EMS or vendor-specific application might have for troubleshooting and resolution. So I don't think those are going to go away, but I think it's important as the first pane of glass to provide that consolidated view. Now, in my experience, network operations centers are very good at finding and addressing issues that are clear service outages, link down, fiber cut, power supply failure, fan failure. Those generates alarms, and NOCs know very well what to do with it. Where this degree of data integration, collection, ingestion, enrichment, and automation really provides significant value is in intermittent problems and service degradations. Historically, those have required significant teams of people to come together and correlate a wide variety of information to understand what's really going on, what happens at the same time, what happens first, what are the symptoms, and what are the root causes. One of the things that AIOps delivers is automation and acceleration of that in a significant way. I've had one of our customers tell us that they used to have large conference calls at least once a week across the company to work on these types of issues, and they simply don't exist anymore. The information's available in the system, is available to everybody behind a few URLs, so that it's unambiguous. There's no argument about it. And it's all brought together through the automation and through measures that allow it to be visible to everyone.
Cool. And then now I'm off mute. I got a question about Gen AI. God, the topic of the year, really, isn't it? And where the value is going to come from. So when looking back across the sorts of models that I do, I've been gathering a spreadsheet together of all the things I think Gen AI could do, and trying to figure out where it could do it for the telco and whether there's any value involved. And I sort of end up with a number of categories. And I think the first wave probably contact center, the terrible, miserable chatbot experience that you get, opportunities there, and vendors kind of focused on that because there is good value for a number of verticals. So I'm expecting that to be providing some value, and then possibly going down into places. I've got a little category called process improvements, which has a variety of things in it, and their code creation probably. I was asking somebody who knows more than I do about how soon Gen AI is going to become more mature, and I said, gosh, isn't it going to take ages for it to do quite large chunks of code and to, I suppose, write programs and so forth? And they're like, and they're like, no, it's going to happen quite fast, actually. So I put there a sort of general number for kind of code creation, and also in areas such as testing, under my process heading, the ability to anomaly detect. One of the interesting things is with ChatGPT, where it is hallucinating, there are going to need to be improvements around its ability to know when it's hallucinating and to find anomalies. And so I'm expecting those kinds of improvements and investments to be able to be taken and used elsewhere. So anywhere where there's anomaly detection, or fault management, fraud, those types of things, I'm expecting those. It's just to aid existing models there to do certain tasks. And then perhaps also, if one were to look in my bucket labeled data management, we've got things like its ability to generate synthetic data, question mark how useful that would be, probably some. And then other data augmentations, I can see it adding additional data sets into existing data sets because they are sort of missing and they need to be included. And then I also quite like its use cases in knowledge management, and by knowledge management I mean anything to do with catalogs, whether they be on the network or elsewhere, or else knowledge management databases where contact center and other kind of customer facing people are using. And there are a couple of things that it could do. It could create articles itself that were missing potentially, and question mark how accurate that would be, but it could be something that it did. It can also improve the digital assistance and the ways of just interacting with those knowledge bases. That's an important one, and something that kind of it's analogous to the chatbots. It's and improvements, that type of thing. And then also potentially what I quite like is it could create automated FAQs dependent on what it thought you wanted as a user, or potentially what others were using, and it could just keep those updated. So there's a nice idea that it'll be sitting in the background thinking about what sort of questions you might want to ask, so that it can provide the answers to you. So I will stop there because there's a bunch of stuff. Anybody who would like to know more, please go to my website, because there is some more information there.
Andrew, the next question is for you. Can you give examples of scaling your solutions?
Sure. So the VIA AIOps it's a multi-layered application. The back end is built on primarily what are known as MPP, multiple parallel processing technologies, and this is really effective in that it can scale up and down very effectively. It runs on VM or container environment, so we can scale down to a small number of nodes or scale up to hundreds of nodes, literally. And we do have that running at customers. So it can be hundreds of millions of measures and events every day. These get processed into tens of thousands of signals, and those signals then turn into hundreds or single-digit thousands of incidents, and it's the incidents that then need action through automation or manual processing. So there's scale up and down, leveraging these different layers of capability. And all of it, though, is still done in a real-time pipeline, and that's very important, as we need, even for non-real-time services, there's a high expectation on everyone to have real-time insights into how everything's running, whether it's a backup service or real-time audio, as we're doing now on this webinar. There's an expectation of real-time visibility and actions in the event that something's not working as desired and expected.
Charlotte, the next question is for you. Where are we going to see the most intelligent automation being deployed? Based on your comments on the first diagram.
Oh, yes, right. So intelligent automation, so we're talking about addition of machine learning, or maybe just sort of advanced analytics into automations. I guess the first place that comes to mind, and the place that I've been talking to people about most often, is automations of the RAN. We've seen, I mean, it's been happening for a bit, and you've seen smaller kind of rules-based automations, but we're beginning to see suggestions, optimate an activity from some of the smaller vendors, optimization for load balancing, perhaps automated neighbor relations, configuration management, a whole list of different machine learning, very specific to the RAN, but also not very cross-domain. In some ways, I think the reason why they're being implemented partly is because they're quite easy to do compared to some of the more complex cross-domain, cross-process automations that are coming down the line. Other places where one might see intelligent automation, well, in the cloud, on the infrastructure, so adapting of configurations, predicting traffic spikes, those sorts of things. There's been activity there, and there is more activity currently. And then I guess the last place, probably in what one might describe, I've just been writing about automation, and I've just lumped everything in under the sort of dark knock idea, and there So prediction of potential future faults, predictive maintenance, traffic optimization, a whole collection of kind of predictive, prescriptive automations. So basically, obviously, you can see kind of all of these are in the kind of top left-hand side of my first diagram. So in the network and things, and then I guess going forwards, more self-healing. I see self-healing and the need for assurance to be the sort of front end of automations as being one of the most difficult things that telcos will tackle. So you don't see an enormous amount today, but I'm expecting to see some really interesting things that use assurance data and solutions to enable kind of more closed loop automations. So yeah, all over the place, but then specifically in future in places like self-healing.
We have time for one more question. Andrew, for you, do you offer a strong consulting partnership?
It's a great question. So I'd say there's two parts to the answer. One is for communication service providers. We do typically have a strong engagement with the service provider, really to focus on initially the business metrics that they want to improve and what's the data necessary to get there and how to effectively use it, how to effectively ingest it, enrich it, and correlate it, and drive the insights from the platform. The second piece of the answer to that is, I would say, for business partners of Vitria, we see that via AIOps is a component in an overall solution ecosystem, and we encourage them and enable them to provide that as a practice on the via AIOps to provide those services and make it an integrated solution across the entire OSS and A3 ecosystem. I also see that AIOps and all of this A3, it's phenomenal for the incremental value that it can be providing in the service provider space, but I also see that it can enable really transformative services, and I think that's embedded in some of the implications in Charlotte's research. But it's not just that it can allow us to do what we're doing faster, but it can really allow us to do new and different things. Really a phenomenal opportunity for mass customization of communication services, where imagine, what Charlotte was talking about before, Gen AI, you can generate your product catalog to meet each individual subscriber or business. They can pick the capabilities they want. You can deploy them through automation, and then through the AIOps assurance, you're able to assure they're delivering on the target SLA that your subscriber expects, with it each being different for each subscriber. It's only through the kind of AIOps and this type of automation that that's really possible.
Excellent discussion. Thanks again to our panelists, and thanks to our attendees. This will close this webinar session, and we thank all of you for attending and participating.
Thank you very much.